Mic check, mic check, mic check. Perfect. That's what we like to hear. All right, let me go ahead and get this link out for all of everybody. All right, perfect. All right, we'll give it a handful of minutes to let everyone hop on in here, and then we'll be good to go. All of you, if you are watching this recording back again, I'll wave my arms and everything. Perfect. Awesome. Hey, Bryce, glad you're able to find it. Yeah, I posted the link in the little announcement just a moment ago to make sure that we were able to find it easily. Okay, get my notepad up. Let's see, viewing the lane, oil transition, drives up, pulling problems. The straighter is greater, dissertation, your launch angles, executing. All right, perfect. Perfect. This will be a good one. I'll give it a couple minutes, guys, if you guys are hopping in to let everyone go in. I know as we kind of keep going along here, I might try next week to change the live stream times, because I know a lot of people are watching football and other sports and stuff, and I don't want to have people miss these live streams and stuff and a chance to tune in live. So if any of you guys have a different suggestion for a different day or time, I figured weekends work best for most people, but if you guys have a better time or a better day or whatever to propose moving forward to make sure that we can get more people in here, then please let me know. I believe going forward, I'm going to be putting up one more episode on the Arsenal Advances and Adjustments playlist, and then next week we'll hop into our new playlist, which I'm still not going to announce as of yet. So it'll be good, guys. We'll be getting some more stuff along here. I suspect that once we get through the next episode next week of the Arsenal Advances and Adjustments, that'll kind of be a good send-off for that series, because I think that's the most I've wanted to kind of juice that one for. I'm actually still kind of up in the air of which one I'm going to pick moving forward, or if I'm even just going to pick one of the ones we've even voted on. I'm still kind of up in the air with it, because you guys know me, I'm pretty indecisive. So we'll see how that goes, but just stay tuned, more information to come. But next week will just be another schedule like this. It'll be another episode for the Arsenal Advances and Adjustments playlist, and then we'll have the live stream over the weekend to get all clarifications again, and we'll move on from there. I suspect this one should be pretty beneficial, because we had a pretty decent, I believe, video for the Arsenal Advantage and Adjustments playlist this week. I think that it was episode 7, I believe it was. Yeah, episode 7. I believe that the episode 7 kind of started to expand a little bit further on kind of where we left off, and I started to kind of break away just a little bit toward the end there and start to kind of dive into the stuff we talked about in the Pathway of Learning. You know, in the Pathway of Learning, happy Sunday, hope you're doing all right. Derby Z, you must be a new viewer. I don't recognize you, so welcome to the channel. I hope you're having a great Sunday, and I hope you're staying warm. And welcome to the channel. So, you know, I kind of started to break off of, in the beginning it was pretty standard. Oh, waving my hands. If you're watching this video back, you can tune in. So, you know, when in that episode, I started to kind of, it started off pretty normal, right? I talked about, you know, how the lane transitions, and started to go into a little bit deeper on, you know, learning to control that depth of reaction, so to speak, as I've been kind of rolling with here as we kind of went through that episode. But then I kind of started to break off from that a little bit, and I kind of went back into the Pathway of Learning mode, and I kind of started to talk about how adjusting is useful, and adjusting is a tool that's meant to be a guide and is meant to help all of us have the highest odds of achieving the strike or spare or whatever it is we're trying to achieve, depending on what we're shooting at, right? But I think something that a lot of people, I wouldn't say necessarily fail to realize, because I don't think that's necessarily correct, but I think something that's often overlooked is adjusting is meant to be a tool and help you, but it's not a save-all, be-all, give-all, grace, you know, thing. Bowling is a precision-based sport, guys, and I'm not saying this to anybody that said something to me or showed me something or whatever. I'm just saying this overall. Also, I'm catching up on emails today, so if you have an email that you shot to me, I will get it to you tonight, so don't worry if you are waiting for email. Sorry, I know I kind of branched off. I was just getting to that because I was kind of neglecting them this week. But adjusting is meant to give you some leeway, especially if you're not bowling on a sport shot, right? That house shot's it's already designed to give you some help, right? But I don't want everyone to think like, oh, like I feel like I'm adjusting well, but maybe I'm missing my target a lot, or I'm just struggling on the execution part of that PACER acronym, like we talked about, the pathway of learning, right? And don't harp on yourself too much if you're under, because I had the same problem for years now, where my mind is always 5 steps ahead of my body. I feel like I could always envision it. I could always see it. I could always, you can only think so much, but if your mind is 5 years ahead of your body, it's kind of up to a dice roll if you can execute at a high enough level to take advantage of that help that the adjusting has given you help with, right? So I think that a lot of it, if you feel like you're starting to really grasp a good portion of these adjusting concepts, which a whole lot of you are based off of some of these emails I started to click through just before I hopped on here, you guys are getting it. It's very clear that all of you are definitely getting these concepts, but just think in my mind, even on shots that you feel like you're executing decent, think, did I execute good enough? Is my execution up to par? And am I playing the lane in a certain way that's catered to my strengths as a bowler? So I think the next episode in the Arsenal Advantage and Adjustments playlist next week will kind of dive a little bit more into more of the physical stuff to help get you guys to take advantage of the adjustments that you are executing while you're out there bowling. So we'll kind of hop through some of the concepts. I have my little stuff written up here. I'm going to be kind of clicking back and forth, so bear with me. So we've been talking about this for a handful of weeks, but I'll still cover it again. And it's this change in your perspective, this visualization philosophy, if you will. And I say it every time, and I feel like a lot of people still struggle to kind of shift their minds from it. It's nobody's fault because of what we're shown, right? When we think of what the bowling lane looks like, we all think of that bird's eye view that you see if you're buying a bowling ball or if you're looking at something online. And we all like to see that because they'll draw the little line or whatever, and it shows the reaction of the ball and whatever. And when you look at that, just about every bowler, when they're first starting out, or even some of the more, like, some of the people that I've even seen, some professionals that still disagreed with me on this, that, when you think of a bowling ball hooking, you very often relate that to how far left or how far right did my ball travel based off of where I had released it from, right? Like, if a ball hooks a lot, bowlers will associate that with the ball coming back really aggressively and seeing that left and right movement. Or if the ball doesn't hook a lot, they look at that as, the bowling ball's not making a lot of left and right movement. But given that we know what the actual dimensions of the lane look like, and given that we know that those are definitely not the same as what the marketing stuff likes to show you with that bird's eye view, it's way longer and way thinner than those photos make it out to be. And with that being said, that alone challenged a lot of your guys' perspectives, and I certainly saw that in some of the comments and questions I was being asked. But we don't want to think of it as how far left and right did our ball move, but rather how soon or late did our ball begin to move. Because the only reason a ball can be hooking more is if it's reading the lane at a sooner point in time, therefore has more lane past it to work with to allow it to move left or right. And then if it's one that's not hooking as much, not going as left or right, that's because that bowling ball is reacting at a later point down lane where there is now less room between where it reacted and the pins, meaning it has less time to see that change in direction to the left and right. So don't think of my ball hooked a lot or didn't hook or whatever. Think of how soon or late did my ball initiate into that hook sequence. Am I a two-hander? Yeah, so I've actually bowled both ways, Brandon. So I bowled one-handed for a little while, and I just recently made the switch, but I still bowl both ways. I believe that each one has their own strengths and stuff. I talk about that a lot in the pathway of learning. But it's always so funny when I talk about this whole perception thing and seeing the lane from front to back, because it's just such a foreign concept to so many bowlers out there, and it's frustrating to I certainly find myself to be frustrated by it, not because of that people see it wrong, because it's not their fault we're seeing it wrong. If the only image you're ever shown is that blown up photo, then it comes to no surprise that I thought it the same, we all thought of it at some point, that the ball hooking is how left or right the ball is traveling. Two-handing is forehand. Yeah, it takes a little bit of adjusting if you're trying to switch, Brandon. You know, it comes to no surprise that a brand new bowler would see it that way. And I guess I'm more frustrated that when these marketing companies and such make these illustrations for the bowling ball's reaction, they don't draw it on a 2-scale lane. Because I think if all of you, when you first got into bowling, were shown that the actual dimensions, the actual long photo that I've shown in some of my videos that show what the real dimensions of the lane look like, if you saw that, you would 100% definitely see it from front to back in the correct way. Because it's very easy to see it because of the optical illusion when you're out there, how left or right the ball's moving. But when you really look at it on a chart for actual dimensions of the lane, it certainly does not look like what you think you're seeing. And that just makes it so interesting. So, you know, and something else that's very unique about bowling, which we've come to realize very quickly, is, I always say it, is that it's almost its own kind of language. Hey, Debbie, nice to see you. What video is that on? Which one, Brett? The blown up one. I had it on just I had it on just a couple episodes ago in the Arsenal Advantage, and there's a whole episode in the Pathway of Learning. I think it's episode 3 where I talk about that whole thing in the Pathway of Learning. So it should be episode 6 in the Arsenal Advantage and Adjustments, or episode 3 in the Pathway of Learning, if you wanted to see it in there as well. But I also have photos in the community as well if you want to see it there. I mean, I could even flip it around here. I started to kind of draw on this one, but I'll show you guys. Here, give me a second. I have it pulled up because I wanted to kind of try to draw this out if we could. Ignore the orange stuff because we'll dive into that stuff a little bit later on. But here you can actually see what the dimensions are. And I mean, just looking at it, again, ignore the orange, guys, bear with me. But I mean, you can see how thin this really looks. Like, this is some pretty thin stuff, right? I mean, what we're usually shown certainly does not look that thin. It looks like it'd be, you know, way wider. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about with, you know, how it's very commonly misconceived. So, you know, the thing that's unique about bowling, and is the most unique about bowling compared to every other sport out there, because there is no other sport like this, is I always say that it's a language that everybody understands, bowling, because no matter what language you speak, no matter where you come from, where you were born, whatever, nobody can see the oil. There is no other sport out there, at least that I know of anyway, that there's the main enemy, which is the playing field, is invisible. That is not something that any other sport provides ever, at least that I know of. Maybe something I haven't heard of, but like, that is such a unique concept to bowling. So because of that, this is the stuff that is always and will always be the most complicated to understand. But what this last episode talked about, and what we'll discuss here, is how is that invisible playing field really changing? How is that invisible playing field actually being altered every time someone throws the ball? Whether it be a warm-up shot, a strike ball, a spare ball, whatever. Every single shot that anybody is throwing is always changing what that playing field looks like, and we cannot see it. So that is what makes this so darn complicated. So just a couple things that I think are incredibly important to talk about with transition that some may seem as common sense, but I still think it's important to mention because it may get you to kind of think of something a little bit. So the first thing that I think is important to kind of lay out in front of you guys, right, is the oil is what is changing that depth of reaction, right? Oil is resistance. Friction is what allows your ball to respond and hook more or hook less. So therefore, that oil is what is the opposite of friction. That's like ice. I always say the car driving on ice, right? If a car is driving on ice, it's going to have a hard time turning. But if it's driving on just a normal paved road, it'll certainly have an easier time turning. So the oil is the ice. The oil is causing that car to not be able to see, to not be able to make that turn that you've told it to make. But once it's able to see a little bit of that dry part of the pavement is when that car is able to make its turn. That is what the oil is doing. And if any of you have ever had a chance to see, or if you've had a chance to bowl on it, where there's a lane with 0 mils of oil on it, good luck. There are very few bowlers out there that I have seen ever actually make it look like there's oil on the lane, because I think a lot of bowlers don't realize how much of a difference that oil is making. If there was no oil on the lane, especially with all these new bowling balls, and how strong and how susceptible to friction this new equipment is, most of your bowling balls would be lucky to even make it halfway down the lane before going in the gutter. I'm dead serious. Like, it is making that big of a difference. So as that oil is getting moved around, that's changing your depth of reaction, thus changing how much or little your bowling ball is hooking, the left or right in this, which we're trying to kind of break away from, right? So a little bit of thought for food, if you will, is if there's one splash of oil applied onto the lane, no matter how many bowlers go on it, unless some foreign substance is applied onto the bowling ball or whatever, there can never be more than that splash of oil that was applied in the beginning on the lane surface, right? How can more oil just come out of thin air? So whenever you first start bowling, the amount of oil that's on there, that will be the maximum amount of oil that lane will see at any given point in time until they re-oil it. There cannot be more oil that appears. But that oil is getting moved around. So I always say that there's two things that bowling balls can and are doing to that lane surface as they go down it. How that oil is changing. So bowling balls have two things they can do. The first thing is dry it up. These bowling balls are the reactive resin and the actual cover stock and the actual surface of those bowling balls are very porous. They're designed to soak up some of that oil. So when they soak up oil, if you've ever seen a bowling ball that comes fresh off the ball return and it has those little rings when the bowling ball is flaring, that is exactly what that oil is. Like, that is the porous surface soaking that up, and that stuff is actually helping your bowling ball react. So your bowling ball can soak up the oil. So that means it's going to directly soak it up into the bowling ball. But the other thing it can do is shove the oil it soaked up down lane. So the best way I can describe it is, let me think of a good thing. So let me grab this ball. This is kind of a good example. So let's say this is a bowling ball. All right, this is obviously not a bowling ball, but this one kind of helps me visualize this a little bit. So you see how there's this pink side and this blue side? So let's say you roll the bowling ball, and the bowling ball is flaring, and it's going down the lane. Let's say, in this crazy world we're living in, that this pink side of the ball, this whole pink side of the ball, is what was making contact with the lane surface at the beginning. So this blue side has never rolled over the lane yet. So this blue side is completely dry. There's no oil that was soaked up on the blue side. But the pink side has soaked up all that oil from the beginning of the lane. So it's rotating and it's soaking up oil. Down lane, anytime this ball is rotating and rotates over the pink side, it's rotating oil that it soaked up from the beginning. Meaning, because the pink side is now making contact with the lane surface down lane, it is now rubbing off some of that oil down lane. So it is essentially shoving some of the oil. So just about, if not every shot that's going down lane is drying up oil in the beginning of the lane, and then as it soaks into that porous surface of your bowling ball, it is then sort of shoving it or redepositing or whatever sort of word you want to put behind it. But it's essentially taking the beginning and making it drier. And I don't want this to be misconceived. It's still going to dry up some of the oil. So I just lost my train of thought. Let me go back again. So when the ball's traveling down the lane, it's still soaking up oil down lane. I don't want you guys to think that because that part of the ball is rolling over the pink spot again, it can't soak up anything. It's always soaking up oil, guys. But anytime it does roll over a spot, it has rolled over before, it has potential to redeposit some of that down the lane. And what makes this incredibly, incredibly complicated is we know that in the oil pattern, it's cut off. So the oil pattern, let's say it's 40 feet. When the bowling lane is freshly oiled, there's no oil past 40 feet. There's just nothing down there, right? But once you start bowling on it, if your bowling ball is flaring and has some oil rings on it and whatever, it could be hitting those past the oil cutoff. So let's say you have accurate Tim, and Accurate Tim is like a sniper. He literally never misses a shot. He's accurate down to the width of a penny, right? He's just dead accurate. There's nothing you can do to stop him. If he hits that same line over and over and over and over and over and over and over, that single line that he's thrown over all those shots is now longer because of that carry down, because of that push down, because of that part of the bowling ball that has those oil rings around it getting hit again past the oil. So now you're looking at a 40-foot pattern in this example. Let's say it's 40 feet with a line right here that Sniper Tim, or whatever I call them, has been hitting is now 41-ish feet because he's shoved that oil down. So think about that for a second. So, I mean, this is like crazy, guys. I mean, I can even show a photo of it. Bowling. I can probably just find one. I know I put one in the video that I think is kind of crazy. Let me see if I can find a good one. But I mean, if you guys like look it up online, like you'll actually see. Oh, here it is. I found it. Let me open this image. So if you look, let me grab this, guys. So if we look here, we can see here, this part of the lane, you see how glossy it is? You see how shiny? You see how it's refracting all this light? We can tell that this is pretty oily. But if we go over here, you see where the oil cuts off? You see how this is all the oil and this is the oil cutoff? This is exactly where the oil pattern cuts off. But look at this. What is this, guys? What is all this past the oil cutoff? Guess what, righties? This is all the junk you guys are carrying down. This is all that stuff. I mean, look at that. Because, you know, if you're bowling on a 4-man team, there's 8 people bowling. I mean, you can even see here the cutoff where it originally was. The cutoff isn't here anymore. The cutoff is brought back a little bit because the balls are soaking it up. But because of how they're flaring, you can see they're not really making lines, but they're making little dots. Because if they're flaring, for example, let's say that this line between these two colors is the flare line of the ball. If it's rolling like this, it's only hitting over that flare line, boop, for a second, boop, for a second, boop, for a second, boop, for a second. So what it's doing is it's making these little dots on the oil, on that, what I just showed you. So again, when I really wish that we could, you know, color the oil or make there some means that you could just see it from where you're standing, but you just can't see it. And that's what makes this so darn difficult. If we could see it, I think this would make it a whole lot easier. I gotta catch up on these. Fun fact, no can. Yeah, that's saying no oil on the candle pin. You only get carried down from urethane and plastic. Reactive doesn't carry down even low flame reactive. It's just not enough to stop your ball from hooking. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's still, it'll certainly make a difference, Mike. I mean, it'll definitely make the shot very inconsistent because, especially if you're bowling a league or something and you're bowling with some bowlers that don't have a consistent release and the flaring that their balls are doing is different, especially if you have someone throwing a urethane or something, you know, those little blotches can certainly make a pretty big difference. And even if it reacts before those blotches, I mean, the oil is still drying up a ton. Like that's what's causing, when I was talking to you, Mike, about how the professionals are chasing the holders because they're trying to get out of that junk that's getting shoved down there, and they're trying to get away from all that. So the breakdown's different every time you bowl too, because you have to think, guys, when you're bowling with a different team, someone who rolls straight, someone who throws this type of ball, someone that throws a ball that's, like Mike said, like a plastic or urethane that is very, very, very renowned for shoving down oil and redepositing it. Like, that stuff makes the transition different every time. So you can't go into your league or go into a tournament or go into a practice for a tournament, for that matter, expecting the way of which that lane is breaking down to be the exact same, because there's no way that it will be the exact same. It's very interesting. I've done a few studies on this, throwing just levels for storm, which barely flares. Little to no carry down. Urethane, yeah. Yeah, the urethane, yeah. So Mike is saying, so the two bowling balls that have the biggest, like, almost practically uncomparable, which he is correct, it's practically uncomparable. You'll find a lot of league bowlers like the reactive stuff because that stuff isn't known for carrying down. But if you've ever seen someone that grabs a urethane or a plastic ball, I bet you'll notice some of the better league bowlers kind of roll their eyes because those urethane and plastic balls are very, very, very effective when it comes to shoving down that oil and causing those little streaks that we saw there in that photo to occur. Now, again, this kind of stuff doesn't happen right away. kind of like Mike said, like it's not enough to just immediately make a difference, right? This stuff takes time to transition. It's a gradual transition, right? That's with everything in bowling. So don't think, if you see someone throwing a urethane or a plastic or whatever, like, oh, the oil's going to carry down, I have to make a huge change all of a sudden. No. If you're striking, you're good, guys. It's a gradual transition, right? The lane, one shot can't cause 100,000 things to happen immediately. But if you're bowling with 5-man teams, five gals on this team, 5 guys on this team, that's 10 people rolling. By the time you roll again, if even just 2 of those 10 people, of those other 9 people, are throwing a plastic or urethane or whatever, it's likely going to cause a difference by the time you're up again, because now those balls are going down the lane, and then your teammates are throwing reactive, and then, I don't know, Sniper Tim comes up with his purple hammer, and then he does this junk, and then he causes that junk to get shoved down, right? So a lot of it's just catering it, but you never want to make it too overcomplicated. I mean, the lane is I always say the lane's trying to tell you a story, right? So I think that this will be I'm going to write down, because I was going to remember to say that. Lane tell, sorry guys, story. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything in the next episode of ANA. So the lane is a book. The lane is trying to tell you a story, but like the oil, we can't see the book. We can't see the story. But if your ball is reading goofy or it starts to catch too soon, the depth of reaction is too soon, the depth of reaction is too late, that's the lane telling you, hey, you throwing that shot, what you did caused this to happen. And it's up to you to say, okay, I can see it. I don't think of hooking as how left or right the ball goes, but rather how soon or late it's reading. Once you can see that, you can start to avoid this kind of stuff. Because the worst thing that you can fall victim to in bowling is when, I always say that it's kind of like a balancing act. You want to balance that depth of reaction. And you can fall into either ends of the stick, which is you fall victim to the really, really burnt up stuff in the beginning, or you fall victim to that shoved down stuff at the end. And obviously that's very dependent on the ball you're throwing. If you're throwing a ball that's designed to catch very soon, well, you're likely not going to fall victim as often to the stuff that's been shoved down, because your bowling ball's depth of reaction is before that transitioning part of the lane. But if you're rolling something like a reactive ball that's designed to read toward the later end of the lane, and there's a bunch of urethane going down there, well, don't come surprised when you're throwing shots and your ball's responding well, but then as that stuff shoves down, your ball's then not able to respond because of that additional carry down at the end of the lane, right? So a lot of it's about balancing that out, balancing that depth of reaction to be, it's like, Goldilocks, like not too warm, not too cold, just right. You don't want it to be too late, not too soon, but just right. And I think that even just what I said here alone will help a lot of you, right? Think, there can never be more oil than what started, and the lane's always going to get drier, but there's only 2 things balls can do: soak up or shove down. That's it. And the 2 balls that are much more renowned for shoving down are plastic and urethane balls. So if you're rolling with a bunch of reactive, you can likely expect that carry down or that shove down to not be too drastic. I mean, that alone helps out a lot. And then going back to where we talked about before with changing your speeds, changing how left or right you are to get your bowling ball to travel through more or less of that oil, helps create that control and that depth, helps create that shape you're looking for. And then it's all about going back to what we've learned in the pathway of learning. And if you have not gone in there yet, if you've come to the channel and you've watched the AA and A series and you have not watched the pathway of learning, my homework for all of you is to watch that series, because both of this series and the POL they're like attached to the hip. They're meant to feed off of each other. And if you see both of those, I think that will answer 80% of any questions that you're having. A bunch of them. I mean, I'm trying to think what else, because I feel like we talked about a good portion of this already. So please guys, ask questions, because I know we have this stuff on here. My biggest problem in my game, lane surface, CP lanes are either wood or synthetic, or a combination of both. Average 110 on wood, 95 on synthetic. Yeah, see, and the surface of the lane, which I actually should talk about that even for us in the next one. Is, if you're bowling on an older, more beat up lane, or ones that are wooden, those allow that oil to get messed up more rapidly. So less is more on a wooden lane, but the synthetic ones are meant to be a little bit rougher and tougher, a little bit of the newer technology we're starting to see in bowling, and the transition is still occurring, but more gradual in comparison to the wooden lanes. You know, and there's 100,000 things out there, guys, that we could talk about, but for the sake of a lot of these series I've had, I like to turn the complicated things into the simple. I mean, we could go as granular as the humidity outside can cause the temperature inside the building to appear more humid that you're bowling at, and can change, you know, the porousness of that surface of the lane. You could say, you know, when it gets a little bit colder and maybe your bowling balls on their way there have been made a little bit colder, that causes your reaction of your bowling ball to be different. But then as your bowling ball heats up, that causes the oil to change different. Guys, there is 105 million different things that go into it. But as long as you get the basic understanding of these concepts, you're freaking golden. You are golden. You are already 18 miles ahead of your peers, promising you. So there's this talk that I hear a lot of bowlers talk about, and it's the concept of straighter is greater. And it always cracks me up because I understand why people say that, but then I always ask everyone, I'm like, hey, so, okay, I agree, but why do you believe straighter is greater? And they just say, oh, because it gives more control. And I say, okay, why? And they're like, oh, you know, it doesn't hook as much, so it's more controlled. That's not really, I get why they say that, but we're not getting granular enough with that statement, because that doesn't really tell me anything. It's more controllable. Why? A lot of what we deem as control is what our eyes like to see. A good portion of that. Because when you're bowling good, you're confident and you feel like you have control. But control is just depth of reaction. When your bowling ball is responding at the same depth every time, it looks like it is creating the same shape to your eyes, and our eyes are trained to like to see the same thing over and over and over again. They're trained to like that stuff. And a lot of bowlers, when they're playing straighter, get their depth of reaction to be very soon. And a lot of bowlers' eyes, especially more in the amateur setting, love to see that. They do not like, and I'm sure many of you can agree, if you're a bowler, a lot of us do not like to play super duper deep and hook the whole lane, and then within the last 15 feet, you see that ball make that massive response and see that depth of reaction very late. A lot of bowlers are not fans of that. A lot of bowlers like the more gradual, very soon initiated, kind of not really more of a response, but more of like a slow curve, right? That's what a lot of bowlers like to see, because it has the most tame looking reaction. But straighter can be greater, but it can also not be. So I think a good way to kind of put some sense in this is to direct over to the laptop. Also, guys, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like hiccuping, like coughing up my words. A lot of people are getting real sick. I don't know if you guys are getting this like super flu crap. Oh my God. I haven't had it yet, but I feel like I'm like exploding all the time. So just bear with me. So I'm going to kind of try to get you guys a little closer here, zoom this in. So this is a very awful look of oil on the lane. That's what this orange was meant to be. So, you know, here's a 40-foot pattern. This is me saying this is the cutoff of the oil. There's 10 times the amount of oil in the center of the lane. Within the two outer arrows, which you can see here, this is where the majority of the oil lies. In the very beginning, there's a bunch of oil in general. And then as it gets further, it starts to taper off, and because less, and less. And then the cutoff of the oil is, and then this whole rest of the spot is totally dry, bone dry, when there's no transition. So logically, let's say we have a bunch of bowlers playing up the center, up around here, right? Maybe you're hitting around the second or third arrow. The beginning of the lane, I'm going to make this white for the time being, so logically, there's so much oil in the beginning of the lane, guys, where your ball's skidding pretty much up to the arrows that it doesn't transition very rapidly. So we'll click down a little bit. So around here, you know, this is where those bowling balls are starting to kind of pick up some of this oil. This is pretty drastic, but this is where some of that oil is starting to get soaked up. And then if people are throwing urethane balls and other junk, and that ball's starting to shove some crap down, I'll make this smaller. You know, you get those little dots like we saw later on. So this is kind of, you know, that one's in the gutter. Hopefully none of you guys threw this one that got it in the gutter. So, you know, this is kind of again, I know it's really hard to envision, guys, but this is the stuff that's getting dried up toward the beginning, and all the stuff that's shoving down oil is shoving it down over here in those little tiny blotches. So logically, if you're falling victim to your ball responding too soon, is because you're falling victim to this junk. I'm going to have this mount. You're falling victim to this stuff here, where all the dry stuff is. Your ball is catching this drier part sooner, and it's then initiating into that hook and roll sequence too soon and is going to the left of the head pin or too close. Then if you're falling victim to the other problem, you might be playing either to the inside of this or to the outside of it. So it's not really responding off of the junk here, but is rather getting, and where it would normally respond near the cutoff of oil, might be catching a couple of these little pickets down here and is then responding too late. So the whole straighter is greater methodology is essentially saying, I can avoid this stuff in the front and almost take advantage of it and then not fall victim to any of the stuff in the back. When you're playing straighter, your ball is initiating into the hooking sequence extremely, extremely early, which you'd think would be kind of, which you think would be kind of wrong, but I'll explain. So when you're playing extremely straight, your ball is likely going totally end over end very, very early, which is why the problem with this is the pins don't like to carry very well when you're playing very straight. Because the ball is going end over end very soon, it doesn't have that drive to hit the pins as hard as one that's releasing its energy at a later point. It's delaying the time of which it's slowly losing its energy and is releasing it at a later point. 1, 2, 3, release them. So when you're playing straighter is greater, you're kind of avoiding the beginning of this. You might be playing to the right of it in the start, so you're avoiding it, but then around here, you're catching this. So now it's responding. So since the depth of response is now here, this is just nothing because your ball's already initiated into its hook and roll sequence. So this isn't doing anything. Do you get what I'm saying? So the reason that people should be saying that straighter is greater is because they're playing to that breakdown the best. But you're losing a butt ton of carry, especially if your bowling ball is going way too end over end. That's what's causing that rollout, which I'm sure some of you have heard me mention. If your bowling ball is seeing a ton of friction very, very, very quickly, that process of precession is so sped up that the bowling ball is going totally end over end. And when the bowling ball is going totally end over end very, very soon, the deflection characteristics of that bowling ball as it is making contact with those pins is changed drastically. And I mean drastically. If you hit the pocket in the same spot with the ball going end over end over end very, very soon, I would say that with about 80% certainty that it's likely going to not hit the pins the same way than it did when it was going totally end over end later on, right? So the depth of reaction is very well controlled, but the process of that ball motion, the process of that precession is what makes the difference. I would like to see your reaction to the candle pin weird once they see a pin stand upside down. That'd be kind of cool. I have to look that stuff up. How far from the pin should the ball roll end over end? So this kind of goes back to the 3 phases of ball motion. So you have your skid. Well, I guess we'll say 4. So you have the skid, hook, roll, and roll end over end. So skidding is within up to around the arrows. The bowling ball is skidding. The hook phase is just past that, getting up to that cutoff of the oil. Once that ball gets to the cutoff of oil, it then starts to after it's hooked, it's then making its way back to the pocket and is only going fully end over end about 5 to 7-ish feet before it is making contact with the head pin. So it's one thing if your ball is making its way back to the pins soon, but if it's making its way back to the pins but isn't going totally end over end, you're likely going to be in a good one. So I think the roll phase is the end over end part. So I like to say that there's 2 phases for it, Mike, I guess. So there's 3 phases, but I just broken it up into 4. So it's like, the ball is, once it's making its way back to the pins, what I'm deeming as the hook phase is once it's reached the furthest right or left it's getting, it's then rolling its way back into the direction of the pocket. So that might be the clarification that you were needing there, But, oh my gosh, guys, I'm so sorry. My voice is so shot. But that's why people are saying straighter is greater for 2 reasons. Because 1, they feel like their eyes are trained to like that super duper early reaction because it's the most tame and doesn't look the most unwielding. And 2, because they don't feel like they have to move around as much because they're falling victim to less of that transition because they're avoiding a good portion of it. If you can just, in a perfect world, guys, and I always say this, right? If you're playing a game and there's 10 challenges, like let's say there's 2 doors. If you're choosing to go in this door and there's 10 challenges you have to go through to make it through this level, and you can go into this door and there's only 1 challenge, what door are you gonna pick? You're gonna pick this one. If you guys can just, if there's a concept of transition or the breakdown of the lane is catered to a certain capacity, right? If in a perfect world, if we can navigate that and just avoid something altogether, that's going to give you the best odds of having something consistent, right? Just strictly logically speaking. So kind of going back to this, when I started to kind of break away from talking about strictly the oil and going back a little bit more into what we discussed in the pathway of learning, I started to kind of talk about, the execution part of it. So there's this concept that I think is extremely, extremely important that a lot of bowlers have asked me about, and that's why I kind of clarified it there, was, it's one thing if you're hitting your target, and this is especially true if you're someone who targets the arrows, which is the majority of bowlers. If you target your arrow, let's say you're looking at the 3rd arrow, and you hit the 3rd arrow, then awesome. But if your bowling ball, given that we care about the depth of reaction, the down lane portion is what we care about the most. If your bowling ball isn't getting to the correct spot down lane to have the correct depth of reaction, then there's no way you're going to strike, right? So if you're hitting the 3rd arrow, but you're throwing the ball, if where you're releasing the ball is right on line with the 3rd arrow, and it's going dead straight at the 3rd arrow, it's going to hook to the left side of the head pin. So you have to relate your target at the arrows back to where your feet are so that where you are projecting it down lane will get it in the correct spot down lane to get that depth of reaction that you're looking for. And the best way I like to describe this is to talk about this concept that a lot of people like to talk about, and is very simple, but is very useful for this, is your launch angles. So your launch angle, I always say in the easiest terms, is quite literally what the name of it entails. The launch angle is the angle of which you're releasing the ball out of your hand at the point of release. So, for example, if you guys are the pins, and I'm a bowler, which I am, if you guys are the pins, and I'm playing pretty direct, right? This is my angle of launch. This is the direction my arm is going to release the ball. This is a pretty direct launch angle. This is what your more straighter bowlers are going to do because they're going to stand more to the right side of the lane, aim at something more in front of them, direct it here, and then it'll make that slow churn over to you guys, right? That makes sense. A more open launch angle would be something that you find like your 2-handers and your more rev dominant bowlers, which are the ones that are standing way to the left, hip lock to ball return, and they're getting their ball to project down here down lane. They're now more open. The ball's going out this way to still, like I said, down lane, be at the correct spot, and then respond back at a later point. So they're achieving the same thing, but the angle of launch out of their hand is different. You have one bowler that's playing very closed and very direct up whatever, maybe the 2nd arrow, and you have your 2-hander who's playing very open, like this, and is getting over the center arrow. But what puts these 2 bowlers in common is down lane, the amount of position to the right or left that's getting down lane is in a same area. So for example, if the break point or friction line of this straight bowler is on the dark rangefinder, the far right far rangefinder, so the 10 board, the 2-hander, although playing way over here, is still getting his or her ball to that same rangefinder or in the vicinity of that same rangefinder. So they're achieving the same result, but they're playing to the oil in a different way because they have to, because of how they release the bowling ball. And if you, how much launch angle difference between a straight and 1-hander and more? How much longer angle? I mean, they're all going to be different a little bit, Mike, right? Every bowler is going to play a little different. I mean, even when you're adjusting, and this is this kind of feeds off it. Even when you're adjusting, guys, if you start here, and I'm throwing up this arrow, and as the lane burns up more, I migrate, let's say, 5 boards left, and I move my target 2 boards left, my launch angle is open more. My launch angle is a little more open because I was playing very direct, but now I've moved more left than my target has, so now my launch angle is a little bit more open. So your launch angles, every time that you're making an adjustment, is changing. But what is not changing is it's ending up in a very similar left or rightedness position down lane. Because if you're bowling and your bowling ball is never getting to the right of the head pin, how could you ever hit the pocket? You get what I'm saying? So your bowling ball has to, at some point, be projected to the right side of the head pin. What's the range between straight arrow? We can get from the fifth arrow. Oh gosh, I don't have the exact degrees on me, Mike. I can get it for you though. Maybe I do actually. Let me see. I don't think I do though, Mike, but I'll check. It's going to be very minimal. It's going to be something similar to that measurement that we were talking about. We were talking about the projection lines from going to the left corner to the head pin, or not to the head pin, to the 10 pin. And what was that again? Like 3 or 4. So it'll be something in the realm of that, and obviously less than that. If you're playing dead direct, if your ball position at the foul line is the exact same as the arrow, that's a 0 degree launch angle. So it'll be anywhere between, and you can have a negative degree launch angle. That is possible. I mean, you'll never ever see that almost ever unless it's like a crazy sport shot, but it is possible. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything, Mike. But it'll be maximum probably around there, because that's probably about the most you could really get it anyway. Unless you're lofting, then I can obviously go more. But again, you know, the launch angles is what's making the magic happen. That's what's getting you. If it would go negative, like let's say I'm standing way over here, Mike, and I'm actually getting the ball. Let's say I'm standing on, let's say where my hand's going down is exactly on the, like the cusp, the edge of the lane. If my arm's coming and I maybe at the arrows get it aboard to the left of where it is, that would be a negative launch angle. Does that make sense? It'd be very, very minuscule amount of negative, but it's possible. Or if you're watching a league bowler and they tug the heck out of it, then it certainly could be a negative launch angle if they miss way left. You know, but you know, when you're changing your launch angles and changing this and that and changing all that to properly get your ball to respond and whatever, a lot of bowlers, when they're making their adjustments, and this is what comes down to execution, is you might say, okay, I'm going to move my feet this much, or I might do this with my speed or whatever, but you have to change your body and change your swing to fit your launch angle. So for the best way I can describe this is, if you've ever gone out and tried to play the lane in a way different than what you have, I bet you'll come to find very, very easily that, like for example, let's say that you're a bowler that's very often playing very close launch angles. You're playing very straight, so to speak. If you go out and practice and try to have a huge open launch angle, I bet your execution will be way off for 2 reasons. 1, because you won't be confident, but 2, because you're not used to playing like that, right? Or even the opposite's true if you're playing someone that's used to playing very open launch angles. If you're someone that's a 2-hander and you tell them, hey, go ahead and hug the gutter line, even if it's not striking, just try it, I bet their execution would be quite poor in relation to what they're used to. That's because your swing has to be catered to your launch angle. And if you're doing something you're not used to, it's hard for a bowler to change their physical game to match that of the launch angle they're playing if their physical game isn't best matched up to that because they're not used to it. And the best way I can describe it is, and this helps out a ton with spares guys, especially if, you know, you're a straighter bowler or whatever, and you're used to playing way over here, but on your 10 pins, you're coming way over here. You have to open yourself up. You have to. Your arm will want to go in the direction, your arm swing has to go in the direction of your target to get it there. But if you are used to being pretty closed to get your arm to go straight, and you then have to move way over here and get your ball to go this way, the only way your arm could go this way is if it goes behind your back a little bit. If my arm went straight out, there's no way I could get my arm to the right. I can only go here, which is what you're used to. But if I play the angle of my body and get my arm to come behind me a little bit, by opening up, I can now project that in. Same with my 2-handers, right? If you're used to opening up, which a lot of them are, that's why you'll notice a lot of 2-handers have that pretty aggressive open up, because they have to get their arm to extend in the direction of their open launch angle. But then what they'll probably do is, if they're over here, they're going to open up a ton, and then they're going to have to like close up or something to get it to go back, which is not good, right? So again, and a lot of people disagree with it on the surface because they think you're going to drift and do other stuff, but it just takes practice. The drift will not cause an issue. You just have to relate, and it's so minuscule because we know the dimensions of the lane. It's not that wide. Sometimes less is more in bowling. You know, I mean, if you usually start this If this is your setup position and you move over here and you're opening, I mean, guys, it's like this much of a difference. Like barely anything. Barely anything. But it makes all the difference if your arm swing can actually extend in the direction of your target. Because again, the house shots and the oil and the patterns you're bowling on, some of them will be forgiving, especially a house shot. If you bowl in a house shot and then you try to bowl in a sport shot, you come to realize very quickly just how graceful and how forgiving those house shots are. You know, they're meant to help you and they're meant to give you that grace, but they're not going to, you know, spoon feed you and keep you alive for a massive miss, right? So if you can cater your physical game to get you to execute at the highest level and keep you much more accurate, that will certainly have a massive impact and make sure that adjusting is giving you the best odds of taking advantage of that forgiveness and that grace that the lane is trying to offer you. And I think that that's a very crazy thing to think about, because a lot of bowlers, you know, may feel like they're working on stuff, and I totally understand that, you know, but like I always say, just to kind of have some humility in it, you know, take some time to work on opening up and try. I always say the best way to work on it, guys, is to try to play the lane to what you're not used to. If you're ever out in practice or something, or you have some extra time to go out, like if you're used to playing up the middle of the lane, play anywhere but the middle of the lane. If you're used to playing up the right side of the lane, play anywhere but the right side of the lane. And you'll come to find very quickly that once you can learn how to play the angle of your body in accordance with your target and making sure that your target you're looking at and where you're standing is projecting it down lane to be to the right of the head pin or to the left of the head pin if you're lefty, that is what will get you that reaction you're looking for. Especially critical with spares. Because, again, you can adjust, which we've all learned, you know, if you go cross lane at your spares, that often gives you the best odds of success because it plays to that oil, which we can't see, right? All of us know that concept, right? We all know, move in the direction of, if we want our ball to respond the right way, we can move in the direction of our miss, because moving right will make it hook more, moving left will make it hook less, or going across lane our spares ensures that we're playing, you know, the best odds of that ratio. But if you're, you know, used to playing over here, and you leave a 10 pin, and you go over here, sure, you're playing the lane the right way, but if your arm isn't going in the direction of your target, it cannot cause miracles. The oil can only help, it cannot cause miracles, right? So play to the lane, but ensure that you're playing your physical game as well to how your launch angles are. Everyone has different launch angles, especially once you start to kind of get a feel for it, it'll click for every single one of you. It certainly did for me. I remember when I first, this is actually pretty good to story. I remember when I first swapped to two-handed, my spare percentage, because I used to track everything, I used that lane talk stuff. When I was still bowling traditionally, I was like it was still not the best, but it was like an 86% spare percentage for all spares, not counting splits. But then when I first switched to two-handed, because the opening up in it was such a different concept to me, my spare percentage was like, I kid you not, guys, like the first like 2 months, it was like, oh my God, like 40%. Like I was missing single, it was bad, it was awful. But then the minute I learned, because I was so used to having to play over here, but then was having to play over here with my other hand on the ball, I wasn't opening up. The minute I learned to open my body up and allow my arm swing to come behind my back just a little bit so I could project it out and get it to the right of the head pin down lane, was the second, not only was I striking a lot more, but was actually able to project my ball at my single and multi-pin spares the correct way. Because we all have done it before. I know you guys have. I mean, I know you've all done this exact thing. You probably go up, you throw, and you already know it's junk. And you're just like, oh, and you don't even want to watch it. You know that because that's your body telling you, hey, your eyes are saying, hey, this is where I wanted to hit. But your body said, oop, I didn't do that. I bet most of you, even with your eyes closed, you could probably feel it. You probably could. If you had your eyes shut, you could be like, oh, I missed it. Just joined, sorry, it's still football season. Oh, you're good, Dan. Hopefully everyone's doing all right in football. Dan, this one's pretty decent. I think this is one of the better streams. We got through all like the lane transition stuff, and we're just talking about like the executing part, kind of like I covered in the end. But this will be rendered, by the way, for all of you. It takes a day to render these because they're so long. So usually like tomorrow morning or so, I'm able to actually make it public. So it'll go public, and I'll have it under the lives and everything. So if you guys want to go back and watch a certain part, certainly can do that. So don't worry. It just takes time because it's so long. But so that's one thing to think about when it comes to the physical game that can very, very directly. The most obvious one would be, if you can't project your ball in a similar spot down lane, it's never going to have a chance. Or the best way to put it, guys, is if your ball is never going to the right of the head pin, it has no shot at hitting the pocket. There's literally a 0% chance that it will hit. You could go Brooklyn, I guess, but if your ball is never, ever at any single point when it's making contact with the lane surface to the right of the head pin, it has no chance of hitting the pocket. That's just a common sense thing. So a lot of that is just, again, relating, if I hit my target, will my ball be projected to the right of the head pin down lane? Right? That's an easy fix. And that takes time, especially if you're, trying to do it. It's hard to, relate the things way down there to what you're seeing right in front of you. That takes time. So just give it some time, but play around with it. And like I said, the best way that you can work on this too is hitting your target. And the best way to work on that is to play the lane in the most uncomfortable way possible. Play in a way you've never played before. Try lofting the gutter, for God's sakes. Do something crazy and see how drastic you have to be with changing your body position to cater to that launch angle you're trying to create. Again, when you're playing the lane way different, don't expect yourself to score well. Don't worry about that. That's why it's practice. Don't worry about scoring well. Worry about, am I projecting the ball the correct way? Am I seeing it? Is what I'm relating to the arrows, to where my feet are, actually being projected where I want it down lane? And that will provide a whole lot of clarity and help a whole lot of you. Not only with your striking, but certainly with your spares a whole lot too. And some other stuff that's physical to think about, which you've heard me talk about a couple times, is I always talk about how footwork can be a big thing. And footwork becomes less of a problem the more repetitions you get, because once you get more repetitions, your physical game starts to kind of solidify itself on its own. But the footwork is one that especially tends to punish a whole lot of the newer bowlers, or even some of the ones that feel a little bit more confident, because if your feet are not traveling in a similar capacity every time you release the bowling ball, which you'll come to realize very quickly if you're doing that exercise where you're playing the lane in a different way, I bet your feet are going to have some issues. What is the ideal footwork? 5 steps, spending and direction. There isn't. So what I always say, Mike, when it comes to footwork, is the only things that are, I guess, optimal with footwork is that they're catered to your speed, right? Because your footwork and your swing speed directly depict the correctness of your timing. If your chin is directly in line with your foot at the point of your arm being completely parallel to the ground, that's going to be very opportune to help you create the most leverage with the bowling ball and get your release to be the most refined. But in terms of the amount of steps and in terms of the direction that they're going and whatever, my only alibi to it is if you can have a similar, as long as it's consistent, it's better than anything else. I mean, everyone has a little bit of a different drift. I wouldn't say that there really isn't anything too optimal, but the only time that you run into most issues with this, guys, is if it's negatively impacting your timing or it's not consistent. And if you're playing the lane in a different way, you'll especially notice this problem, where we'll kind of go off the example. Let's say you're used to playing pretty direct and you walk pretty straight at your target you're looking at. If you try to play very, very steep and open up, your feet, almost all bowlers do this. They like to walk at their target and not be direct to the lane surface. So, if you're playing over here and your target's right in front of you most of the time, well, you're walking straight at the lane surface. But if you go over here and you're not opening up a ton and your target's over here, I bet most of you won't walk like this. You'll walk like this. You'll walk in the direction of your target, which if you're walking in the direction of your target, think about it. If I start here and walk in the direction of my target and end up here at the line, versus if I stand right here and walk in the direction of my target and end up here at the line, I didn't change anything. I could move 50 boards for all I care. I mean, I find it like this. I mean, I'm gonna end up in the same. That if you guys, that'd be crazy. But I mean, if you do something like that, you're gonna end up in the same spot every time, and it's gonna make no help for you, because now your momentum is going in a different direction. Same could be opposite if you're over here. If you're walking this way or something, your momentum's going in different directions. Your speed at which you're walking is likely going to change because your feet are crossing over. I mean, you're doing like you're playing hopscotch, and we don't have to do that. So the most optimal thing is that it's consistent. If you start here and you drift a couple boards to the left, so long as every time you go, even if you start over here, if you drift a couple boards to the left, well, I can't because there's a thing here, but if you drift a couple boards left, here and you drift a couple boards left here, then it's consistent. At the very least, wherever you're setting up, you know you're going to end up in the foul line in some sort of capacity to where you're standing. But if you always walk in the direction of your target, you're almost nullifying any adjustments you're making here. The only adjustments that would make a difference if you walk to the same spot in the foul line is forward and backward. Because if you get to the exact same spot and you go forward, that just means your steps are going to be a little closer and you'll throw the ball slower. And if you start a little farther back, that means your steps will be longer and a little faster, right? So the only thing you can really change is speed. But if your laydown position is the exact same, any left or right or little teeny weeny forward and back moves are making almost zero difference. So if you are especially, a newer bowler or one that is used to playing the lane in one certain capacity, if you try to start messing with these angles of your body and playing to that launch angle, a lot of you are going to come to realize very quickly, especially if you take a video of yourself bowling normal versus bowling and playing the lane in a way that you're not used to, I can almost guarantee you a good portion of you, your steps are gonna run into issues, because that's especially makes it more complicated when you're trying to envision your launch angle. Because, like, for example, let's say I'm setting up here, because this is some other food for thought, Mike, with, thinking about this kind of stuff, is if I set up here, let's say I have good footwork, it's at least consistent. Let's say I drift 5 boards left. So I end up like this, here to the foul line in relation to here where I'm standing at the setup. So this is how different it is, right? If I'm in my setup and I'm looking at my target, let's say it's the third arrow, and from here, if I hit the third arrow, it's going where I want. Guess what? When I walk up, I'm not launching it from where I was, I'm launching it from where I drifted to, meaning instead of my launch angle being here, it's now here. So now not only does my body have to open up or change something to compensate for that, but what I envisioned when I was setting up isn't what the reality was, because I thought my ball would be projected down lane to go here, but it actually went here. Does that make sense? So if you have, even if it's just something small, you have to almost compensate for that. So if I'm setting up and I know before I go, I drift to the left, okay, I cannot look at the third arrow to get my ball down lane where I want it, because I'm not releasing from here, I'm releasing from here. So it's like, okay, I'll look 3 boards left of that, because from where I drift to where it will be, once I drifted, well then project it down lane. Okay, then you go. So you almost have to kind of compensate for your footwork. But again, if it's at least consistent, I know every time whether I'm setting up here, or whether I'm setting up here, or whether I'm setting up, God knows, in Timbuktu, right? If I always know, okay, from wherever the heck I'm standing, I'll end up X amount of boards, left, right, forward, back, whatever, upside down, whatever, I can at least confidently say, okay, look at it from the perspective of where I will end up, not where I am now. Then draw that line down lane, back to my position at the arrows, done. And then I go and I execute my shot. That will help you be a ton more consistent. Do I need a crossover? Crossovers actually can be very useful if you're trying to play a more open angle, Mike, because that's another issue that can kind of cause problems with the footwork. That's a good thing to mention, is if you're used to playing pretty closed, this hip doesn't become as much of a problem if your arms swing straight. But if your arm has to go behind your body, your hip tends to become a little bit of a burden. So what Mike was asking is a crossover step. So usually it's the step predecessing. So if you're a 5-step, it'd be your second. So this second step, my leg is crossing over. I'm making it very drastic so you guys can see. My legs are crossed over. When I do this, my hip goes from here to inside. So now I then have some space to clear out my arm swing and get it behind me so I can project it out to the right of me. So I would say crossover steps, again, they can certainly help if you're playing, a steeper angle, but if you don't always have a crossover step, Mike, that's going to cause some variance in your drifting, right? Because, if you walk dead straight over here, but then you introduce a new step over here, well, now I just we did a little Michael Jackson over to the side, 3 boards, it's little stuff like that makes a difference, guys. But I would say it mostly helps a lot for a lot of bowlers that, either have bigger hips or ones that need help clearing it. I have a crossover step, a pretty mean one too. I actually have a pretty big drift if you guys have seen me bowl. It's taken me a long time to compensate for it, but I mean, again, at least every time I go up there, again, it can be the most goofy thing ever, guys. I always say this, there's no one way to bowl, and I will always say that. But if what you're doing every time with your feet and everything is at least consistent, that is setting you up for a whole lot more opportunity, a whole lot more opportunity. And then again, if you have inconsistencies, you just have to think, if I'm inconsistent on this, I'm to some capacity nullifying the adjustments I'm making. And that's honestly a very difficult pill to swallow, because it's like, oh my God, like I do so many things. How can I possibly do everything correctly? You know, it's, I wouldn't say it's really a harsh reality, but it's just something to just bear in mind, guys. You know, I mean, if you're playing chess and someone else is playing checkers, then the odds of you winning is way lower. And the way the thing that makes it different from you playing chess versus checkers is people that play checkers are those that make adjustments but have some physical errors that practically nullify them. If your footwork's off, if your launch angles are off, if your envisionments of shots is off, you're playing checkers. But if you can properly envision things, have consistent footwork, have the correct timing, have all this stuff, you're playing chess. You can take advantage of these adjustments. Don't fall victim to playing on a 2D field. It's a 3D world. Use the third dimension when you're making your adjustments. But even if you are using the third dimension, if you have inconsistencies, that's almost putting you back in that two-dimensional left and right adjustments is all I can do landscape. You know, and that's just a very interesting thing to say. I was taught that you should drift 5 boards. Big drifts are either from bad footwork or bad alignment. They certainly can be. I'm not going to sit here and say that I have the smoothest game. I would say 5 boards is probably about, that definitely sounds correct. I think mine, as of this year, I'm at 8 boards. So I'm pretty close to 5, but definitely a little bit more. It's a lot of that kind of stuff, Mike. It really is just about like playing to how you're built. You know what I mean? And then that's no shame or me picking on anybody or saying it. But if you're a stocky person and you have more hips or more shoulders, or if you have real small shoulders and bigger hips, that means that, you know, whatever, you have less clearance or whatever. But if you have real, you know, if you're like Robert Smith that has broad shoulders and he looks like a Dorito. I mean, he doesn't have to really clear anything because his arm's already out here. You know what I mean? He's like a macho man. So like, a lot of it's just about catering it to yourself as a bowler. So I agree that, you know, there is some things that are optimal with everything for that matter, but, you know, not every bowler is built the same or bowls the same. That's the best way I could put it, you know? I mean, if the only way to strike was to drift 5 boards, then, I mean, there's a whole lot of people out there that I don't think that should be winning some of these titles. When I tried to send a video, what's the easy way you can get it? Yeah, you can do my phone number, which is on the website as well, Debbie. Coach, I have 4 boards left. Should my target be 2 boards left? Explain, please, if I'm wrong. That sounds about right. I would say in relation to where you're looking at, the best way that you can kind of work to exercise this. Also, I'm not sure if I knew you. R. Maslowski? R. Maslowski. 2221. Well, welcome. I'm glad I get to meet you. I would say you're pretty much in the realm, but the best way I could say to kind of learn to kind of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of put some visuals to it, because I think visuals are the best thing to do. Set up and look at a pin. So look at like the 10 pin and set up somewhere and draw a line back to where you're set up, wherever you're set up. Draw a line back from the 10 pin to the arrows, right? And see where you're crossing the arrows at. Then go up to the foul line and stand where you will end up, and then draw a line from the 10 pin to where you ended up. And then see that delta between the two, because where you're looking and where you're standing are going to have a different variance in your lines. Because if you're looking over here, if you're looking directly at it and you're over here, those lines are going to be a little bit closer together. But if I'm starting way over here and moving over here, those lines might be a little bit further apart. That's kind of a weird thing to think about, but a lot of it has to do with playing to the lane, because drawing those lines is a whole thing of geometry and angles and stuff, and it's extremely complicated. So I would say go out, set up like normal, draw your line from something that's very definitive, and then go up to the foul line where you will end up and draw the line from that same definitive thing and measure the difference between the two. And that should get you pretty close in the realm of what you want. Good question. Any advice on what data I should be gathering during my swing? Seems like I can't observe my release board, target board, friction board, and deflection response at all at once. Too much data to remember. Usually just see the pins flying, hit or miss everything else. Yeah, it's that's actually, Dan, that's actually a very good question, and I think that's something that a lot of bowlers often have difficulties with. Going to try to chart some games tomorrow. Okay, perfect. That'd be great. You know, it's very difficult, and that's why I always say I like to try to make things as simple as possible, because this is such a physics and numbers and data-driven sport, because we don't have a playing field to look at. So the way we compensate for that as bowlers is to make all this fancy, crazy data. And I'm all for that sometimes, but that makes it very complicated. And it's very, very hard once you're trying to pick up on this stuff to monitor 100,000 things at once. It's just, I mean, you should never expect anybody to be able to do that. Even the professionals, they can't monitor every single little teeny weeny thing all at once. So I would say when you're trying to learn this stuff, your best friend is to monitor one specific thing at a time in live time and record it, and then go back and reference your recording to I guess analyze everything else. Because when you're first trying to learn, let's say you're first trying to learn this depth of reaction thing, if you're trying to remember, okay, my feet have to walk the same amount. Okay, I have to make sure my body is angled in the correct direction in accordance with my launch angle. Okay, I have to make sure I drew the line back from where I'm trying to get it down lane back to my position at the arrows. Okay, then I have to make sure once I actually deliver the bowling ball, my feet drift the correct amount, and I have to make sure it goes over the correct arrow after I corrected my launch angle. I have to make sure that it actually gets down to the correct point in the lane and it's actually getting at the correct depth of reaction that I'm looking for. I bet you couldn't understand what 80% of what I just said there was. There's no freaking way you can remember all that. There's no way. All at once. There's no way. So pick one thing. I would say focus in a situation like that where you're trying to fix everything we said here. Focus on just playing the angle of your body to get to an achievable spot down lane. And record a handful of shots. Record a handful of shots. And then go back and say, okay, on that one I missed to the left. Let me see in my setup what I did that caused me to miss me to the left. And you'd be like, oh, my arm kind of strayed away from behind my back there, and I went across my body like this, and I missed left. Okay, you remedied that. Then you can start to say, okay, did my feet drift the correct amount? Okay, did I hit my arrow? Okay, did it have a same depth of response down lane? You get what I'm saying? So when you're actually out there executing, pick one or two things that you're struggling with the most, and just ingrain those in the back of your mind. And then go back to your footage to make sure that you are properly executing those in the correct capacity, and analyze the stuff that you otherwise can't all track all at once because you're focused on one thing. I always say when you go out and practice, it's always about picking one, maybe two if you're feeling real ballsy, things to work on, but record it and make sure that you actually felt an adequate amount of improvement in those two things, but then use that time to look at the other things, analyze other data that you can of your ball motion, of your shot shape, of your physical game that you can then bring into your next practice and refine on. That's the best way I say to do it, because that is very hard to monitor all that, especially with all the stuff we've been talking about. That's very difficult. I notice when I move left of the center dot, board 20 starts to disappear. Going to try to record too if the lanes are not too crowded. Good advice. Thinking about it. Think alike again. Yep, exactly. Target probably the focus right. Yep, I would have to agree, Dan. But yep, great minds think alike. Absolutely, yes, sir. I notice when I move left of the center dot, board 20, my drift starts to disappear. See, so again, that's likely because, you know, if you're used to playing, because it sounds like you're used to playing, this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you are used to playing on the right side of the lane and you're confined over here, you probably feel a little bit confined of that gutter. I can guarantee this is what's happening, almost guaranteed it. When you are a bowler that's way up on the right-hand side, you know I cannot afford to miss to the right because the ball doesn't hook from the gray board, which is the gutter. So what our bodies like to do without you realizing it is you're kind of like, ooh, I don't want to walk to the right because I don't want to get close to the gutter. So when you're stepping, you like to kind of get away from that gutter a little bit. But then once you are in toward the center of the lane further, it's like, oh wait, now if I move to the left, I'm getting closer to this gutter over here. So now you're like, ooh, I don't want to go that way. So you straighten yourself out. There's your problem. That's exactly what it is. I bet you probably didn't realize it. It's because our bodies, not even whether you realized it, you have not realized it. You have not realized that your body feels confined by that lane surface. It does. Everybody's bodies feel a little bit confined, whether you realize it or not. And when you feel confined like that, your body feels natural with gravitating toward the center of the lane because you feel like you have the most room to the left or right of you to kind of move around. Your body feels that confinement, right? when I talk about how long it is versus how wide it is, your body is feeling that. If it was really that wide, why would you feel so confined, guys? You know what I mean? So that is just going to come down to repetition. So I would always say, you know, if it feels comfortable to continue having that drift over here, then just stick with it over here. The best way I can say to describe it is once you start to open up, don't change your footwork, just change your upper body rotation. Your shoulders are the biggest difference in where your arm is projecting, right? Because if your shoulders aren't open, there's no way your arm can get behind your body to get it out to the right once you move to the left-hand side. The only way you can get it there is by opening up your shoulders just a little bit, and your arm can go behind your body, or vice versa. You get what I'm saying? So don't change like your whole, like don't like set up and think you have to be like all, you know, don't change everything. It's very, very minute changes that'll make a big difference. But that's a good question. So, all right, guys, my throat is absolutely shot, but I feel like we had a very, very good one, good stream here. So a couple of housekeeping things, and I'll let you guys go. So again, I believe that next week I will be the last, if not likely one of the last episodes of the AANA series. I think that we're getting into a good point. If you are watching this now and you are caught up in the AANA series and you want some more content to look at, if you have not seen the Pathway of Learning yet, that is going to be your best friend, because the Arsenal Advanced and Adjustments playlist and the Pathway of Learning are married. They're like two peas in a pod. Those two series often correlate very, very well to each other. And all of my students that I've been coaching thus far say that they have learned the most from watching those two series consecutively, because a lot of concepts from each of them directly feed into the other one. So make sure that you reference both of those. So I suspect we'll get one more, maybe two more of the AANA series. And then once I get that done, because I want to get that series done before we roll out the next one, we'll start to roll out the next series from there on moving forward. I think it'll be pretty fun. I'm still kind of up in the air. If you have sent me videos on email or any text or anything, I'm going to just have some more water or something to kind of get my throat back in check, and then I will happily be checking those tonight. So if you have messaged me something or are going to be, I will get back to you by the end of the night. Other than that, as always, if you guys have any questions, seriously, keep reaching out. I'm very, very happy that more of you are beginning to feel more and more confident with reaching out, because, again, especially while the channel is still pretty young, even though we finally hit the awesome 500 subscribers mark, 520 now, that's crazy. Like, it's only going to keep getting up, guys, and my time I'll be able to have to devote to all of you one-on-one will continue to get smaller as we get more and more viewers and more people to reach out. So take as much advantage of this, especially while it's still free, as you can, so I can get you all the help that you need. And again, you're never going to feel like you're bothering me. Don't ever feel like whatever. Don't ever feel uncomfortable. If you have a question, if you feel uncomfortable, if you want more information or whatever, reach out. I am a fully open book, and I will get all of you guys the care, the advice, and all of the things that you need to be as successful as you can be. So I hope all of you have a great week. Send me some cool honor scores, because I know a lot of you guys like to do that. Let me know how it's going. And yeah, I will see all of you certainly by Tuesday, when we have the Quick Tip Tuesday, the AANA video, and likely on this Sunday as well, once we have the next live stream. So, all right, guys, stay warm, drive safe, and bowl well.